Today, I have some beginning advice for every felon out there. If the cops show up and start pointing guns at you and you have a gun on your person, just leave it in whatever pocket or where it is, because otherwise bad things happen.
Sound advice.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's badge cam lesson here at Active Self-Protection. I'm your host, John Correa.
I'm your co-host, Mike Williver. Today's video comes to us once again from San Antonio. San Antonio, what's going on?
Palm pepper spray is next generation OC spray. It's hot at 1.4% major capsaicinoids, and its modular design means you can customize it exactly to you. 3 different setups, lots of different color combinations. You can make it exactly as you like. And the flip top safety prevents accidental discharges. It's 10 to 12 foot range and 25 half-second blasts. Make sure that you can keep that long range eye poke at long range. I trust Palm OC and I recommend it for everyone for self-defense. Officers are coming in hot here on a guy who is on parole and also wanted for multiple armed robberies this very day. And they know where he is. They're coming around the backside of an apartment complex to take this guy into custody. Again, multiple armed robberies this very day. We have badge cam audio. Let's listen in.
All the way to the back.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your fucking hands. Let me see your fucking hands. Get on the fucking ground now. Get on the ground before I fucking shoot you. Get on the ground before I fucking shoot you. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Let me see your fucking hands. Get on the fucking ground. Save him. Let me see your fucking hands. Get on the fucking ground. Get him, pound. Tase him.
Second officer support there. You can see that he was firing on the guy. You can clearly see as he falls over here, he's not completely disoriented and disabled by the taser. He's got a gun in his hand that he raises up and points at the officers. He did not make it. He took the carport temperature challenge. The interesting bit on this one, if you go and read the news stories that I've linked in the description, his girlfriend has, and baby mama has an interview in this one. And she doesn't blame the cops. She's like, yeah, I was trying to help him get his life back together. And I knew about his violent past and I was trying to help him overcome it. And he was a sweet, goofy nerd, but he also was a hood rat. And so these things happen. That was an interesting outcome there. But seriously, you've got to go read the news story in the description on this one, as his significant other, in a really shocking turn of events, was like, yeah, I was trying to help him get his life turned around, but he chose the hood rat life, and so that sucks.
Womp womp.
And props to her for recognizing who the fault is here. Mike, I think it's worth remembering again, yes, this is a felony stop, and this officer rolls in hot and immediately at gunpoint, because we're not talking about a minor issue here. This isn't a guy who, is just walking down the street. This dude has committed multiple armed robberies this very day. And so does this officer need to have a gun in hand? Unequivocally, yes.
So yeah, one or two videos ago, we had another situation where, it was a bad guy. They knew it was a bad guy. They knew he just committed violent acts. They knew there was a propensity for him to, a high likelihood he was armed with a firearm of some kind. So yeah, this is 100% justified. Understand something. I've been the person right in front of the gaggle or by myself to draw a gun and take down a really bad guy. It's scary, even as a law enforcement officer. It's a scary thing to do because this could end in you possibly having your life taken. So this officer is amped up. Hopefully he maintained his arousal level as best he could. I always talk about being at 11. I think when I talk about the officer, quote unquote, being at 11, what I mean is his awareness. Like he's aware, head on a swivel, this can go really poorly. I need to be very aware of my surroundings and my tactics and what's going on. I think that he was here for sure. We'll talk about the taser here in a minute, but everything up to this point is 100% justified. And understand you've got this guy cornered. There's a very real likely possibility he's going to want to fight back. He's going to want to try to escape, or worse yet, fight back potentially with a firearm. It turns out he did have a firearm, so I have no problem with anything done up to this point.
Well, and as you go in as the first officer here, knowing that, hey, for a few seconds at least, it's all going to be on me. That it's going to take my backup a little bit of time to get to me in order to support me in this. Now, hopefully, they planned this out, that he's right behind you, right? That they weren't just like, yeah, I'll go in and figure it out and then we'll go from there. It might have been okay, rather than try to move in on the guy here and immediately close, to just hold him at gunpoint until your partner does show up, because again, that extra set of eyes, extra set of hands might give you a little bit more. But that's a pretty nitpicky thing here. Sometimes you don't get time to plan. Sometimes you're like, nope, there he is right now. I gotta go. We gotta get this guy into custody. So I don't have any problem with him pointing a gun at him at all. Now, we did say this, and I am gonna say it again, because our officer's like, hey, put that down. I don't know why the guy is conspicuously ignoring, but our officer chooses here to draw his taser with his support hand. We got to stop here for a second, because I really don't like taser in one hand and gun in the other. If you have an officer who is deadly force, cover it, cool. Put your gun in the holster, then draw your taser. Verify that it's the taser and use the taser. Because otherwise, you really run the first risk here, Mike, of what we'd call a slip and capture error. Of when you think, I'm going to use the taser, but instead you use the gun. And things happen like, that's what happened to Kim Potter. That was a slip and capture error, that she was convicted of manslaughter for shooting somebody. And we don't want that. So either the taser in hand or the gun in hand, but not both.
So hear what John is saying here. I'm former law enforcement, but current law enforcement officers, my brothers and sisters out there still doing the job. Hear John when he says this. This is not because we're worried about this particular bad guy potentially, being harmed in some kind of way. That's also something we have to consider. But I don't want you losing your job, losing your house, and going to prison because you made a simple error. So having a gun in one hand and a taser in the other hand is a bad idea every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I would say at this point, he's backed into a corner. I can't tell if there's a way for him to escape if he goes forward to that fence and makes a hard left or a right. But the guy's backed into a corner. I'm not thinking too much about less lethal at this point. I'm thinking about keeping my lethal in my hand and making sure he does what he's told to do and doesn't escape and doesn't pull a gun and fight back. Because with someone this knuckleheadish, I don't want to take any chances. So I would have preferred just keep the gun out, keep giving commands. And when John mentioned conspicuous ignoring, that's a real thing. That's when you're saying to someone, hey, we're making eye contact, do this thing, and they're just staring at you like a dog has been shown a card trick. That's conspicuous ignoring, meaning they're just not listening to what you're saying, and it's intentional.
It really is intentional. I also want to note, if you don't have time to put your gun away, take your taser out, and verify that it's a taser visually and by tactile means, then you don't have time for a taser. It's not a good time for a taser. A taser is not an emergency deployment item. So if you don't have that much time and you don't have lethal cover, it's not a good time for a taser. Recognize it inside of its use lane and don't use it outside its use lane. That's when we have problems with the taser, when it is used outside of its mission. So please don't put a taser in one hand and a gun in the other. Didn't end up causing errors here, but it sure could have. Now, I want to note here, does this guy need to get shot? Yes. Well, he pulled a gun. Well, and yet again, we see, Mike, how many times are we going to have to sing a chorus of, hey, felons, if you don't want to get shot, don't pull a gun, because he rolled over with and pointed his gun at the cops. There's literally no better use case. This officer clearly was at fear for his own life, clearly could have used deadly force here. And I don't know if this was suicide by cop, if he was just going to go down in a blaze of glory, or if he's that stupid that he thinks he can toss it. But this is a great way to get shot.
Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking, and you're thinking to yourself, well, he was tased, so he was, neuromuscular incapacitation. He was frozen in it was just an unfortunate way that he froze up and the gun was pointed at him. Look, maybe, right? Maybe. However, this officer doesn't have time to go through all those possibilities. The fact is, this guy, before the taser darts, before his body completed that circuit, right, of the taser, before that happened, he had a firearm in his hand. And I don't think for one moment he was planning on tossing it. I think he was planning on brandishing it and or firing it at these officers in an attempt to escape. Again, another guy who doesn't care about anything but getting away. The complete narcissist. All he wants to do is get away from the police and go about and do his knuckleheadedness, another day. So I don't buy for a second that it's just because he was incapacitated with a taser, therefore the gun was frozen in an unfortunate position. If you look, he's got his arm bent just perfectly right to aim it at that officer, and looks like he has his finger on the trigger. I can't confirm that. John has a more clear image of this than I do. But either way, this guy is clearly pointing a gun at a police officer. Sorry, man. If you'd have listened 10 seconds ago, you wouldn't be in this position, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, he put the quarter in the jukebox, right? So he gets to dance to the tune. I got no problems with the officer shooting him. He does need to be shot. We're going to talk about this officer who is on screen and using a single hand here on the gun in just a moment, because I don't think he even has the taser in hand. But fill this guy in, fill him in quickly. You need to get this threat stopped. They do a good job of that. Here's the other reason why I don't like taser in one hand and gun in the other, because when you need the gun, then guess what? He's only got one hand on it. Now, with him and his partner both working together, they were able to effectively end the threat. And success is a heck of a deodorant. However, I want to note you are always going to be able to shoot with accuracy and speed better with two hands on the gun. So again, if you need the taser, you should only have the taser and have it in both hands. If you need your firearm, you need it in both hands. So this is another reason I don't like the taser in one hand and the gun in the other, especially because, Mike, it feels like cops just really hate dropping tasers.
Yeah, so I think Sean covered that pretty well. So I'm going to move on to something else, which is, what do you do if you need to draw your gun and there is something in your hand? Let's say you're just on a traffic stop and you're issuing a citation. Let's say you're on a pedestrian stop and you're writing the citation for littering or jaywalking or whatever it is, and you have your ticket book right in your hand, your cite book or your citation book or your flashlight, or fill in the blanks, right? Your notepad, your pen, your handcuffs, no matter what it is, your taser for that matter, your pepper spray, your baton. I don't care what it is. If it's time to start shooting, empty that hand. If it's your dominant or non-dominant hand, empty that hand and let's get two hands on the firearm, because the only thing that matters right now is delivering effective fire on target so that I can live to be critiqued by a couple of guys on the internet, 6 months from now. All I want to do is make it through this next 5 seconds of this gunfight. Get it through your heads. Sorry to be a little harsh here. Get it through your heads. Empty that hand and get both hands on your gun, because that is your best chance at surviving this gun battle that you now find yourself in. The taser, like I said, taser, handcuffs, baton, pepper spray, doesn't matter what it is.
Super
get it out of your
helpful
hand and get in the fight.
Mike. Thank you so much for that. Now, again, our second officer who shows up, he shows up, gets in the fight very, very quickly. I do want to say, why is he one-handed on the gun? He doesn't have anything in his left hand, in his support hand. But I think he's kind of thinking about stuff. You saw him kind of think about going for his cuffs, I think. I think he's kind of going for his radio a little bit. So he's not thinking, wait a minute, I may need to use both hands on this gun. Again, you got to think through this stuff in advance. So then that way, when it shows up, you're only responding. You are going to unthought knowns. Remember, we have unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. And we want you all the way over in the unconscious competence, that you're so good at it that you just do it without thinking about it because it is ingrained in who you are. Clearly, this officer, he hadn't gotten to that unconscious competence place with two hands on the gun. I don't necessarily blame him for that, because firearms training is something that officers do every year, but only a few hours. And unless you're a gun guy, you're not going to spend that much time dry practicing and putting your hands on the gun and getting two hands to it, and that being your default. So officer, the department's not going to pay you for that. You're going to have to end up doing that so that if you have to protect yourself and your partner, that you can do so. Now, all that said, you might come back and say, well, John, it worked okay in this case. It did. And sometimes fortuitous outcomes reinforce bad behavior and reinforce, suboptimal performance. And they did enough in this particular case. I'm just telling you, it's dangerous. So make sure that you're working to get two hands on the gun. I really do think, though, Mike, that these guys, at the end of the day, they were brave officers to get in there against a guy that we know is a violent felon. And they got in there, handled their business, tried to save this guy's life, but he ended up choosing what he chose. And they did what they had to do to protect themselves and cover their ass.